When I spoke to you on the phone when we first met, I was really intrigued with the fact that you have traveled a lot internationally. And the first thing that comes to my mind is quarantining and PCR tests and masks. And I asked you if you've had to do any of those, and you said no. And my mind just went crazy. And I want to do a little bit of a role play with you in a sense where you get out of the plane and you're confronted with the federal police or whatever it is, the security guards. What do you say to them?
So let me see. One of the times I was detained for 4 hours was, say, in Dublin Airport with the airport police. So they have, a system that you have to fill in a passenger locator form. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what if you were to fill in a passenger locator form, you actually are waiving all of your rights, and you agree to lock yourself up like a prisoner in your house for 14 days, right? By signing it, or by downloading any app and agreeing to the terms. So I have, never worn a mask in any of this and never filled in a passenger locator form. And so I obviously do not fill it in going on the flight, right? Okay, you don't download any app, but when you come back, of course I had to wait for the airport police that took like an hour and a half to come. And then I said, no, I am not filling it in because I am evoking my inalienable rights, which are rights that you are given to you by birth under a natural law, right? That we have freedom to travel. And so if you know the law, which has ended up in English constitutional law, which is the basis of the English legal system, across the world, including in Australia and Ireland, that the natural law, you have rights that can never be taken away. And you have a hierarchy of laws, which is the natural law, the rule of law, then the people, okay? Mm-hmm. And then the people bring the government into existence. And then you have the various arms of government, you have the parliament and the judiciary. But what's interesting in the constitutional law is that the government is brought into existence by the people, but that the government, the three tiers of government, cannot bring in any acts, statutes, guidelines, or regulations that infringe on the natural law rights, which are inalienable, given to us from our birth, can never be taken away. And those freedoms and rights include freedom of speech, freedom to think, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, bodily integrity, and access to justice. They can never be taken away. So when I evoke, right, my inalienable, so unalienable, right, it just cannot be taken away, right to freedom of travel to the police, I say to them then, because everyone who's in government, which is 4 tiers down, they swear an oath, right? And they swear an oath to uphold the constitutions, and the constitutions are brought into existence under natural law, which is stated in their preamble or is, in the history of law, that governments can bring in nothing that will infringe on our freedom to travel, right? Now, of course, it doesn't mean if you travel to another country that you have to have an immigration system or a visa system, right? But if you are a person or a citizen of your own country, you have, rights to come, and if you have rights to travel, right? So it just means that for no reason can they stop you traveling, okay? Especially if you're returning home. And so I say to the guards then, are you acting under oath? Okay, everywhere. And then usually they don't answer, right? So I say yes or no. And then they try and arrest you and detain you. And I say, I'm going to video you. And they say, you can't video me in the airport. And then I say, yes, I can video you, because if you're committing a crime as a servant or a civil servant or an oath taker, right, as a salary from the government that we're paying, then you can video. And then they say, no, we have all these guidelines. And I say, no, a guideline cannot infringe it. So that if you touch me with handcuffs, right, I don't consent to be stopped. And they obviously go in front of you to stop you. I don't consent to you touching me. And then I say, if you put handcuffs on, that's a crime of battery, right? Because I have rights. If you touch me or stop me traveling, you are acting outside your oath. That is unlawful. If you touch me or put handcuffs on me, that is a crime of battery, which is 5 years in prison. If a policeman does something unlawful, they actually go outside their protection of the police, right? And if you don't answer whether you're acting under oath, so if they were acting under oath, right, which they never say yes, because they know that what they're doing is unlawful. And if a policeman obviously admits to doing unlawful behavior and committing a crime, right, then of course that can be up to 20 years in prison, okay, for being in a police uniform committing a crime. So usually they don't answer. And then when they go to put the handcuffs on, I recorded that you are entering now into a contract and that my rate is, you can nominate a rate because it's contract law, right? You don't consent, but you're saying if you do that, and I say it will cost you 4,000 euros an hour, right? And usually you have 3 policemen. So usually after 4 or 5 hours, I was saying you, all of you will be 20,000, that I will inform them as well, that I will not pay any fine because it's unlawful. At that time, it was 6 months in prison as up to a 10,000 fine, I think. And that I will just charge every hour to them, including preparing the case. It will go to the High Court and the Supreme Court, and I will win because what you're doing is unlawful. So unlawful detention, kidnapping, the crime of battery, and a policeman acting under oath, you know, additionally dressed up as a policeman going around falsely arresting people. And often, you know, they obviously are not that well informed. So I have, you know, been detained by 10 police, I think, in Berlin when I was going over. And then in Trafalgar Square, I was one of them, you know, one of 5 or 6 people organizing the Trafalgar Square in England. And the police were doing, you know, to detain us on the days. And I said it to them all. And they all decided not to arrest me and to let me go everywhere. But if you sign the form, which I've never done, you are actually reneging your rights. So it's very insidious, right? So when they get you to fill in the passenger, you know, the way in the beginning, it was actually harder in the beginning because everybody in the airport were saying, have you filled the passenger locator form? So I would say, you know, just no, right? And then, but if you do that before you come to the airport, you are actually waiving, you're basically signing to say, I agree, you know, voluntarily to lock myself into my home for 2 weeks so I can't earn an income. And potentially you're voluntarily subjecting yourself to PCR testing. But because I was coming in and out of the country, you know, every week traveling, of course, I never signed the form, but if you did, it would mean then that any time in my life, they could go back if you've traveled a week later, right? That I would have, if I had done it, signed a form to confine myself, lock myself as a prisoner in my home. And if I went to the airport system again, they could come back and say that the terms, if you breach your voluntary signature of the passenger locator form, they can then say that that is a crime. And then you would have signed voluntarily that you were going to imprison yourself in your home. And then if you left your home to go on a plane, then you would have committed a crime, right? So therefore, people need to be aware of their, you know, the law and their rights. And my long-term plan is to, of course, educate people. It's very easy on the natural law, you know, constitutional law, common law, whatever. It's very easy, but just you don't waive your rights.
So, Dolores, what you're telling me is the first thing that we need to do is not fill out any of those permit, border, crossing, whatever you want to call it, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. And we can go on. I've obviously set up Freedom Airway, right? freedomairway.com to provide a international travel, right? Which we'll talk about. But the thing in all this, like I've never worn a mask, right? Is the first thing you do is say no, okay? Because with natural law, right? You have, everyone has an inalienable, you know, well, inalienable rights, but also knows right from wrong. So you also know if you don't want to wear a mask or you don't want someone to tell you you can't travel, right? You know that it's wrong what they're doing. Ask or anything is to say no. And then someone has to force you, right, to do something you don't want to do. And you just use the words, I do not consent, right? And you know, we know that if someone does anything to you that you don't consent, generally, right? That's a crime. They know it, right? So that when you say no, you're actually pushing back on the individual that is now in a tyrannical, authoritarian way, forcing you to do something to your body, like wear a mask, or to imprison you in your home without your consent, right? And automatically you can actually sense it in your core, you know? People know right from wrong, children know right from wrong, that if they're forcing you to do something you don't want to do, that you've done all your life that it's wrong.